6-year-old girl. In the heart of war and betrayal, she became a queen, but never a ruler. In a palace where the walls had ears and the ears had daggers, she was held hostage, tormented, and forgotten. But why? Why did history erase her? This is France, late 14th century. The kingdom is collapsing. The king is mad. The queen is accused of treason, and royal children, caught in a storm of power and deception, are used as pawns. And in the middle of this chaos, a girl is born. A girl whose name would be spoken for centuries without reverence. Isabelle of France. She became queen not once, but twice, and yet never had a single moment of true agency in her life. In the dying embers of the 14th century, as France spiraled into political collapse, famine, and civil war, a child was born into the twisted heart of European monarchy. Her name was Isabelle of France. She would become a queen not once, but twice, yet never a ruler. A princess raised in a gilded cage, her life was governed not by her will, but by the shifting ambitions of kings, diplomats, and traitors. She was a daughter of madness, a pawn of war, and a woman lost to history. Isabelle was born in 1389, the youngest daughter of King Charles VI of France and Queen Isabeau of Bavaria. From the moment she took her first breath, the kingdom around her was teetering on the edge. Her father, Charles, was already descending into a madness that would become legendary. He believed he was made of glass and would shatter if touched. He would flee from his wife in terror, fall into long comas, and suffer fits of violent rage, one of which ended in the murder of 4 of his own knights. Servants wore padded clothes, and sharp objects were removed from court. Doctors, alchemists, and mystics failed to cure him. The royal court became a grotesque theater of fear. While Charles faded in and out of lucidity, Isabelle's mother, Queen Isabeau, assumed power. Though brilliant, she was resented. She was accused of adultery, embezzlement, and betraying France. Rumors of incest with her brother-in-law, the Duke of Orleans, followed her. Propaganda painted her as a monster. One woodcut showed her with wolf jaws and a crown made of vipers. Isabelle and her siblings grew up surrounded by whispers, slander, and suspicion. At 6, Isabelle was sent to England to marry Richard II. He was nearly 30. She was a child. The marriage was a truce, a tool to delay war. Richard had executed rivals and needed legitimacy. Isabelle became his peace offering. Their marriage was unconsummated. Richard, reportedly kind, called her his little queen. But she was essentially a well-kept hostage. Her life in England was somber. She lived with French ladies in waiting and clung to her culture. Contemporary letters describe her as stoic beyond her years. She rarely laughed. She embroidered flowers and French proverbs, while political factions watched her every move. Nobody really knew what was going on in that little girl's head, but everyone feared her. If you were in that castle, would you fight or surrender? And if you're still with us in the shadows of her story, drop a like so we know you're listening. In 1399, Richard was deposed by Henry Bolingbroke. Richard was imprisoned and likely starved to death. Isabelle, now a child widow, refused to marry Henry's son. That defiance cost her everything. Her French attendants were expelled. She was isolated in remote castles, Eltham, Windsor, Havering. Her food was monitored, her mail censored. Reports describe her refusing to eat, fasting, and spending days staring out windows, clutching a handkerchief with the fleur-de-lis. In 1401, after long negotiations, she was allowed to return to France. But her homeland had changed. Her father was nearly catatonic. Her mother, politically ruined. France was at war with itself. Armagnacs versus Burgundians. Isabelle had no power, no wealth, no future. At 17, she was married again, to the 11-year-old Charles of Orleans. This time it wasn't only politics. They formed a real bond. Their cordon bleu became a refuge of poetry and art. Charles wrote verses for her. She supported artists. For a fleeting moment, she had something like peace. But in 1415, Charles was captured at Agincourt. Isabelle, pregnant, was left alone again. She gave birth to a daughter, Jeanne. Months later, Isabelle died at age 26. No cause was recorded. Some say illness, others heartbreak. She was buried without ceremony. No tomb, no requiem. Her name faded. She became a ghost in the pages of history. But her life held dark, hidden truths, ones rarely told. As a child, Isabelle saw 3 coups unfold firsthand. Once, she was smuggled through hidden passages of the Louvre as armed men stormed the palace. In another, she was forced to kneel before a rebel noble who had just declared her father unfit to rule. At court, Isabelle overheard whispers of poison. Her nursemaid confessed under torture to plotting with foreign spies. Her governess vanished overnight, never seen again. First chronicler wrote, "The walls had ears, and the ears had daggers." When Richard II was overthrown, his body was dug up and put on public display. Isabelle was forced to look at it, cold, lifeless, swollen. English nobles stood beside her, watching her face. She was kept under surveillance even in childhood. Servants were bribed to report on her behavior. Her dolls were searched for hidden notes. Once, she tried to send a letter sewn into a sleeve. It was intercepted. Her lady-in-waiting was beaten for aiding her. She was ordered to write glowing letters about Henry IV, the man who usurped her husband's throne. Scribes edited her words before they were sent. Some historians believe she inserted coded messages of resistance. When she returned to France, she begged her mother to let her live in a convent. She was refused. Isabeau reminded her she was born to be bartered. During the Civil War, Isabelle watched her second husband's relatives fall. The Duke of Burgundy was murdered in the street. His successor was hacked to death in a church. Isabelle attended funerals for men she knew since childhood, each draped in flags soaked in betrayal. She never received her dowry from England. Despite multiple treaties, she was never compensated. French envoys filed complaints for years, but the English crown ignored them. Rumors circulated that Isabelle was pregnant when Richard died. If so, the child vanished. No records, no name. Some say she miscarried in grief. Others believe the child was hidden or killed. In England, she was called the Ghost Bride. She walked palace halls in white veils, never speaking to the courtiers who mocked her. One wrote, "She floats more than she walks." She wrote poetry that challenged monarchy, but it was destroyed. One court official called her verses dangerous. Only fragments remain. In the final days, she was seen kneeling in the chapel for hours, unmoving. Her confessor claimed she wept for Richard until the end. If you think Isabelle's story ends here, wait. There are things even history is afraid to speak of. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss what comes next, because we're only just approaching the darkness. At her funeral, only 2 monks and 1 servant attended. No noble, no priest of rank. Her name was erased from English records, omitted from genealogies. Some believe this was deliberate, a way to erase her defiance. One English noblewoman later confessed that Isabelle had been slapped and restrained during her captivity. Her hands were bruised from pulling at locked doors. She may have smuggled messages to French loyalists while still under English guard. A servant was hanged for it. All of this paints a portrait of a woman trapped in a world designed to silence her. A woman who was traded, used, erased, but not forgotten. Isabelle of France, never sovereign. Her name appears in treaties, not love songs. Her face is absent from tapestries. Her story, for centuries, was left to rot in archives. But in the darkness, she endured. Her silence was resistance. Her presence, ghost-like, spectral, lingers. Isabelle died, young, alone, without a grave or name. But her death began another bloody story. The story of Edward II, her husband, a king who also fell victim to betrayal. Our next video covers the tragic downfall of Edward II, a tale that cannot be understood without knowing Isabelle. Don't miss what comes next.